Programming Throwdown, episode 175, resume writing. Take it away, Patrick.
I don't know that we've ever talked about it before, but probably have. We've talked about all the things. Every so often it ebbs and flows. I have a DSLR and I had recently upgraded to a slightly newer one, but smaller than my old setup. So, this is like a physical camera. It's large, has interchangeable lens.
Now, what is the SLR? Is the D digital?
So D is digital. SLR is single lens reflex. So way back in the day, if you ever see the like old cameras, there's like two lenses, one above each other. Those were reflex cameras. In other words, you could look through and the lenses moved in synchronized fashion. But when you take the picture, the bottom lens opens up and exposes the film, but the top lens is what you're focusing and composing the picture through. And so these are, I think they were called TLR, two lens reflex. And then, so they moved to single lens reflex, which has a mirror at a 45-degree angle behind the lens. So the light shines through the lens, bounces up into a pentagonal prism and in through the little cup at the top that you would look through. And then when you go to take the picture, the mirror drops down and exposes the film. So then they had digital SLRs where instead of exposing the film, it exposes a silicon sensor, CMOS or CCD. Then actually now it's a bit of a misnomer. Most of the lens reflexes, the mirrors popping down are gone, and they're all mirrorless cameras. And so the lens is directly exposing the sensor pretty much all the time. And then the thing on the back or the thing in the eyepiece is, rendering the basically it's like a monitor for the sensor. But I don't know. I still call them DSLRs because whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Stuck at it. But yeah, so
they give better quality than like your phone. That's the point.
So I mean, that's the question, right? And so my phone does pretty good. I have a pretty recent iPhone personally, but I think most of the phones, we've been in a bit of a opportunity for, I think, features to equalize a bit. And so I have a pretty nice phone. It has a lot of nice features. It takes great pictures if you take time to, compose them properly, make sure they're exposed properly. Mine has an option to, do them as the raw images rather than the JPEG images. So you get more dynamic range in the colors. It uses extra bits to store the color information. So 10 bits instead of normally 8 bits. So you can do those things and it actually is pretty nice. But if you think about it, like just in your head, like the size of those lenses, the size of the chip that does it, however many megapixels they are, they're still physically very, very, very small. And so they deal with a lot of noise issues and they make up for it by, they sell so many of them, the amount of dollars they can spend to, do tons of software processing and have the best sensors and do all that. It is a huge factor rather than, these mirrorless cameras, maybe they sell, 1/10, 1/100th as many as they sell, whatever the top line phone is. And so they can't spend as much. But the physical size of the sensor, like you mentioned, can be a lot bigger. So they call it like a full frame. Again, going back, it used to be 35 millimeter film, which is 35 millimeters on the diagonal. If you have a full frame sensor, which is the one I happen to have, it's 35 millimeters on the diagonal. I mean, that's size that is like a huge percentage of my phone's total dimensions. Like that's a big sensor. And so when you go to take pictures, if you just look at them, in small size, they feel equivalent. Like if you just pick it up and snap it like you would with your phone, you don't really notice a difference. But again, if you take time to, get a lens that has maybe a bigger zoom and, that kind of stuff, you start to realize, there's a lot of more data that you can pull out. There's a lot more color you can kind of shift around. You can kind of change the exposure because the camera doesn't, when you go to take a picture, you don't know what you're trying to show. And if you notice, like if you go take a picture at sunset and you pull up your phone or even one of these cameras and you take a picture, it's trying to adjust the white balance. So, you're not necessarily seeing the colors and you're looking out towards a very bright part of the sky with everything else dark. And so it's trying to average out across the whole scene. Now in your phone, you probably have options, but people rarely use them. But
I have no idea what half those buttons do on the camera app.
There we go. But when you have a physical camera, you have all these, buttons and you sort of like switches and dials and all that stuff is sort of immediately there. And so for me, it's a bit of a first world problem, I guess, a luxury, I would say. But you can do these things with the phone you have. But if you're able to have one of these cameras, it forces you into a slightly different way of thinking. And what you find is, or at least I do, that the actual process of taking these pictures, sort of like treating them with care, which of course takes orders of magnitude longer than clicking the auto adjust feature and posting them to family and in a group chat or you on social media or whatever. And I don't even really share these pictures with anyone, but just sort of having them and sort of taking time with the content picture. So I'll take a picture of my kid, but rather than just, hey, smile, snap, it'd be like, hang on, I'm going to take a picture, and you have them sit, a little nicer, and you get a little bit more of a composed thing, which is how growing up, at least, that's how kind of all the pictures were. No one just like rapid, click, 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 click. Like people would set up a picture, you would take a picture. Now you could say that's fake, but it has a certain, nostalgia and specialness to it. When you go back to edit that picture, you're sort of re-engaging a bit with that moment because you took time to kind of think through it. And then it's a little bit of a more of a thoughtful process. So I've been finding that interesting and to answer your question, I don't actually know, because I treat them so differently. The force yourself to use your phone and to use it in the way where you adjust all the settings. And it's obviously not going to be as capable still. Like, you can put a absolutely gigantic lens with a huge zoom, and your phone can't do that. But if you shoot in the sort of normal ranges of things, if you really took time, learned a sophisticated phone parameter app, and figured all that, maybe they're the same. But just pointing out that it's kind of, today our interaction with photography is just so far removed than even 30 years ago, 20 years ago, the crappy cell phone cameras like today. And then lots of news events happen, and you just realize so many people are taking pictures, taking video, that even when events happen and people didn't realize they were going to happen, they end up getting captured. And it's just this very interesting thing that I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about, but I've recently been re-engaging with it and just thinking through like pictures as physical, like actually, when was the last time, I don't know, for me, it's been a really long time, printed a picture out, like sent it off to be developed.
Oh yeah.
Or printed it or held it in my hand. It's an entirely different thing to like hold a picture in your hand and like look at it. It's crazy.
I can't remember the last time I held, a picture, one of my own pictures. That's
Dude, it's wild. I probably haven't had a picture developed until recently. I went on a trip and took a family portrait and had it printed for my family. I like a large. I was like the first time in probably 5, 6, 7 years I'd had like a picture become a physical set of atoms.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. First of all, like, how do you learn how to take pictures? Like, is this something you learned on the internet? Did you take like a? Yeah, okay, got it.
And I'm by no means claiming to be an artist about it. It's a interesting process, and it's really. I mean, if you're an engineer, it's not that hard.
That makes sense. So you went on YouTube video, and it's like, okay, here's what the different acronyms are, and here's when
shutter
to use one
speed,
or the other,
aperture, focal length. Like you can learn these in an hour of watching YouTube videos and looking on tutorials. Yeah.
Okay, my second question is like, when you're doing something like printing a portrait, have you tried any of these like super scale algorithms where like they'll like increase the DPI of your photo using AI? And did you need anything like that?
So I did recently. I had a picture where I needed to zoom in a little bit more, and I actually did use, which I think I could have done it on my phone too, but I happened to have used my large camera for it. I have a Sony mirrorless camera, and it has a bunch of extra resolution. So I zoomed in, and it was really noisy because, when you blow a picture up, it's noisy. So I actually didn't do super scaling. I didn't really need more resolution, but I did run one of the AI like denoisifiers. And it did actually like, I don't want to say creepy because it didn't put more detail than was there, but it did a really good job. Like it was suitable. It went from like, this is blurry and you can see what's happening to like, it was a picture at an event for one of my kids. And so it was, like them doing something up on a stage. And so it was far and it was dark and it was very noisy. And afterwards, I was able to send it to people, and no one realized this was like a tiny corner of a picture that I took because,
wow,
limitations.
It's amazing.
So
it's amazing. I recently used the thing where you select an area. Basically, my wife had this photo and there were people in the background.
Yeah.
It was at the beach, and unfortunately there was a woman in the background bending over, and so it was just like the most embarrassing shot of this poor stranger in our family photo. And So yeah, there's this tool you just lasso that part of the image, you
Yep.
press a button, and it in paints it. And I was also pretty surprised. When you see examples, you're obviously seeing the best of something, or someone's at least tried multiple times, and they're showing, like when you read a research paper, they're showing you something that they're really proud of. And so I was a little skeptical going in, but it was great. I mean, it even drew like a bird. I was like, wow. It's like it had a ton of creativity. It's just shocking where that industry is from.
But I think to be clear, I think that's a relatively recent development. I think that even, I believe I've seen some press release from Google has been doing some of that, that they are offering that in their Google Photo service and stuff too. But I know Photoshop or Lightroom added some of the things you're talking about, some others. But I think it's been like a 2-year kind of recent development. If you had tried this 5 years ago and you'd circled it, it would have done some sort of like color averaging, blur, texture stamping kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Versus it wouldn't have, like if you had a wave at a diagonal, it would have like cut a piece of a wave and put a nut, but it wouldn't have lined up quite right. It would have left a thing. And it's always been possible for people to go in and do it. It just would have taken enormous amounts of skill and time. Now you just, like you said, you just draw a loop around it, tell it you want it, removed, and it will, hypothesize about what was there based on what was in the input.
Yeah, I mean, it basically drew an even larger behind, which is exactly what I wanted.
That word has become ambiguous in this circumstance because you did want behind. What was behind the person? But yeah.
That's right. That's exactly. All
right, we're degenerating now. We better get on to. No, people are like, "Where's the programming talk?"
Oh God. All right, news and links. Let's see, Patrick, you're first.
Okay. So this one is an article on the blog by, I should have looked it up, but the blog's name is Robert Heaton. So I'm going to go that's the author's name, called Pi Sky Wi-Fi. And they don't give actually, as far as I could tell in the blog post, they didn't give a ton of specifics about what they were doing. But the story is so funny, but I wanted to use it as per usual to like talk about kind of this. There's actually something really serious here. And what this person did is they kind of have a story. I believe it's probably apocryphal, but they have this story about they were flying in an airplane and they wanted to use the internet, but it charges you some amount of money that always feels like a little bit too expensive, but maybe. And so they needed to do this work. They were going to go, but then they realized they basically could go into their account on the website of the company of the plane. And that was not considered like accessing the internet. So they could, go onto the company's website, check flight times, go to their frequent flyer mile account, that kind of stuff. Then they realized within the frequent flyer mile, there were a couple of their account settings that they could edit, things like their name, or, you could imagine like your address. And then they had the bright idea of, wait a minute, I could just start editing these fields. And if I ran a program back home, I could, basically start parlaying information by, think like base64 encoding. They use a different scheme, but, I could fill out one field as like a request for a website and have a server back home that could chunk up the website and put it into a different field that I could then read. And we could basically pass information at this super low rate, right? You imagine.
Wait, let me repeat this and see if I understand. Okay. So the idea is, you can't get on the internet without paying whatever, some nominal fee. But what you can do for free is like, in Delta or whatever, you can watch movies. There's like websites they do give you for free.
Yep.
And you're saying one of the free websites is one where you can update, let's say, your first and last name on the Delta account. Yeah. And so you're saying this person made his first name like google.com and then his last name is like the google.com website. Like another server is also editing the name.
Yeah, like imagine it took the whole Google website, encoded it in, base64 and put it in his last name. That would, of course, made it really easy. There are, of course, character limits. So, you also need to chunk it up, which means you need a protocol, which means you're probably not doing it by hand. So, he, had a script and then a proxy sitting on top of the script. Horrible idea. Very likely if they figure out what you're doing, you could, easily it's like tied to your account, right? Anyways, not a good idea. I would definitely not recommend.
Yeah, don't try at home.
100 different reasons. But so two things. So the blog article is super useful because it goes into this, that if you the beauty of how we have the internet today is it's all these layers, right? And we tend to forget about them. You might learn them in school, but all the layers, and there's a transport layer and then application layer. And but this is the beauty of it, is like, if he can find a way to pass bytes reliably, or even unreliably, but pass bytes from the airplane to a computer and from the computer back through some protocol, no matter how slow, no matter how bad the data rate is, you can basically wrap that up, and then everything above it just doesn't care. It may be slow. Like, you go to google.com and you wait 20 minutes before it loads, but it doesn't matter. Like, it'll work.
Right.
And so this sort of thing. So one, that's an interesting discussion, a very weird way to get into that discussion about the internet and the, protocols behind it and the kind of specifics that was going on. But this is a broader thing, is that, to be honest, I've been in this boat before where, I did development on microcontrollers or something else really small. They didn't have even maybe a serial port that we could use in a way that would work. And if you can find a way to turn something on and off, we were turning a LED, blinking an LED. If you can do it and you have a way to sense it, you can establish a communications protocol. And so we had a thing where, like, we would do a run, we would store up a bunch of data, and then the thing would go into a mode where it would basically blink out ones and zeros with, dashes and dots, like the telegraph. And we had a little like photo cell that would record it. And then we would decode the zeros and ones, and we would get out the log messages. And sometimes I think we get into the state where we kind of forget about these things, that not that long ago, we were using telephones with audio sound to transmit the internet through, like, this is the way it was. But it actually is still true today. And there are times, if you're going to do, I would call those things kind of hacker things, where you're trying to get something out where you don't have full access, or not always, definitely not in an illegal way, but just in a sort of surreptitious way. It's just definitely a very interesting thought experiment to kind of challenge yourself, instead of just paying the definitely much easier, whatever, $10, $8 to use the internet. Instead, you do this horrible end around. But the point isn't the point. The point isn't like not paying for internet and getting this really slow thing. The idea is being creative and using the tools that are given to you.
Yeah, totally. One thing that, just from a I guess, like, artistic standpoint, I really love the way that this person wrote kind of in the first person, and kind of like toggled between telling a story and then going into some technical details. I feel like it's really well done. I love it. Ends with I scrolled around the HTML and reflected that this had been the most and least productive flight of my life.
There's of course
cool.
a problem there, where if you kind of need to fly twice, because the first time you kind of discover this, but unless you pay for the internet, you can't actually access your computer back home or set something up on the other end. So
that's true. Yeah, you have to build it and pay for that. Yeah, that's totally right. But now he has the source code available. So,
so anyone who wants to get banned,
yeah, that's right. All right. My news story, first news story, is this video making animated characters with AI art. I thought this was so cool. I stumbled upon this because I typed this into Google expecting to see a research paper on how to do animations. Like, everyone knows about DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, these things where you type in, a horse eating hot dogs on the moon, and it'll like render that photo, right? But there's nothing, and there are things for video as well, right? But what you don't have is something where it's like, a 2D, rig of a horse, and what you end up with is this marionette puppet, right? That you can animate. And so I just thought this is like an interesting void here. Like, no one's built like a text to animation. And searching for that, I found this video, which I thought was just amazing. This is basically somebody they're heavily promoting Adobe products, although it's not an official Adobe video. But what this person does is they start with text to image, and I think they put like a lion wearing a suit or something like that, a bipedal lion wearing a suit. And so you get this lion standing on two legs, with a pretty human like figure, but definitely a lion head. wearing a suit, and then this whole jungle background. And so he goes through, like, he deletes the background, but it's, it's a complex high frequency background. It's not like it's on a white sheet or something. So he shows how you can use AI to like detect the background in a sophisticated way, deletes the background, and then the lion, because it's a photo, one of the hands of the lion is covering his like midsection. So again, using like lasso tools, but they're like intelligent, like it's kind of like snapping you to like the semantic segment, right? He like pulls the arm off, and then now you have this like hand arm shaped void in the torso of the character. So he uses the AI in painting, and it draws like a pocket of the genes that was missing, and all of that. And now he has this arm that's kind of bent, so he unbends it using some other tools. And basically, within about 15 minutes, he goes from this image that was generated by an AI to this like 2D character that can blink and the mouth can move and everything. I thought that was really interesting, kind of like symbiosis of, AI and, real skilled artisan work on the computer. So it's definitely worth about 10, 15 minutes. I mean, if you're not super into it, you can kind of skip ahead, skip to different parts. But I was just enthralled with this person's ability and all the different AI tools that some of which I didn't even know existed.
I've seen a few examples like this where you mentioned it. A person with skill just becomes like much more powerful, having access to tools and being willing to have a creative approach to the problem. So,
right.
Being willing to say, it doesn't matter that I have 100 years or whatever that's too many, 20 years of experience drawing this scene from scratch. I'm going to see if there's I'll call it better way, but also being willing to leverage the fact that I am still an artist. I still know how to rig a 2D, animated character is something, for instance, I wouldn't know how to do, but they did. And so, yeah, I think this is one of those, I'm curious to see what'll happen. Like maybe AI will just leap ahead and be able to do it from scratch, but much more likely in the midterm, we're going to see willing people able to just scale their productivity unbelievably using approaches that are kind of blended or hybrid like this. And we don't really have a term to call it. Like it's not really AI art anymore, but
right,
started that way.
Yeah, that's right. I have a friend who maybe AI assisted art or something. I have a friend who's in the games industry, and he goes to a lot of these conventions. And he said last year, if you went to GDC or one of these conventions and you gave a talk on AI art, someone would just like stab you in the back, in the heart, and drag you away. Metaphorically speaking, like the audience would just destroy you,
rotten tomatoes at you.
Yeah, there would be like no trace of you left on planet Earth. But this year he went to I don't remember where. I saw at GDC, but he just got back from another conference, and he said it's just everywhere now. He said, it is kind of like he described it as like COVID, where people tried to contain it, and then now it's just everywhere. So it's like there's whole companies with stands and booths, like talking about their AI tools, and people are giving talks on it, and there's just no going back from that now.
Wild times.
Yeah.
All right, my next article, I'll keep this short. The title is "The Real 10x Developer Makes Their Whole Team Better." This is on the Stack Overflow blog. I just generally wanted to take a moment on 10x engineers. This blog post is pretty short and mostly just talking about there's a sort of mythical 10x developer that floats around in various forms, and people debate, are there really people 10x more productive? And the answer is, in certain contexts, probably, or even more. Sometimes people call them sort of rock star engineers or rock star developers. And the blog is trying to make the point that through a specific process, they were sort of saying, communities of practice. I've heard them called centers of excellence, or people gathering together. And the real way to be effective is to basically help the team around you. And you really can 10x an experience or the ability of your team to total output if you can really communicate, knit together, encourage good practices, mentor, like these kinds of things. And it really does resonate with me. This is something that has become, I don't know, like a pet peeve is exactly the right word. But people, oh, I want to hire someone just like super, super smart, like just the smartest person in the room. And it's maybe, I mean, when I look at them or think about composing teams that or working with such people, it's like, but how do they communicate? How do they work with others? If they're super amazing, in certain circumstances, it may be useful, but far more useful is a person that can, work well with others, help, make, better than the sum of the pieces, I guess, is the kind of way of saying that. And it sounds goofy, but I really have run across people who are like that. They tend to be very giving, so they're not super, self-focused. They're always trying to look around and say, how can they help people? How can they improve the stack? How can they make tooling better? And I really do think there's the ability to just have a very outsized return on, a single person if you consider it across their ability to help others. And in some ways, regardless of whether there are people who can be, 10 times more effective code output, I think that the ability to knit together a team is sort of far more useful. And so when people think about their own careers, this is much less talked about. How to help others, how to make your team better. It's about, and even on this podcast, somewhat, it's like specific skills you can learn, ways to make your own, problem solving better and more improved. And those things are important, but also thinking through how are you a good team player? And it's a much more subtle and less easy to talk about problem.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Totally. Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, the 10x engineer thing. I mean, one thing that comes to mind is like, it's really kind of a bit of a faulty premise, right? Because if a person is a 10x engineer, then it really just becomes about saving money, right? Like if a person is doing 10 times as much work, then that's 9 people you don't have to hire. And it just becomes this big money game. Like Cisco hires 10 engineers, Facebook hires one 10x engineer, and they both end up exactly the same. And I feel like it's kind of a false premise. I think that I think you're right. I think there's several different things that you can combine with your engineering skill that are very like in high demand and low supply. So I think engineers that are really talented and can also kind of coordinate and influence a team is that's a really hard combination to find, and those people I think do really well. I think engineers that are extremely multidisciplinary and can build a prototype by themselves, that is also kind of rare. Like someone who is, they talk about the mythical like full stack engineer, right? But really it's like, you might be a front end person, but maybe you have to train this AI because you have this idea that involves the latest AI and front end. And so the ability to just go in and learn whatever it takes to build like a 10% solution, a minimum viable product. I think that's a rare skill. A lot of people are stuck kind of in their niche. And when you can combine those two, it's like, okay, here's someone who can build prototypes that have, something visual. It could be internal, doesn't have to be perfect, but some kind of visual component and some interesting kind of backend component. And then like motivate that prototype so that a team can work with them to take that prototype into something that creates value. Those, when you start like finding the intersection of these very rare skills, that's when you start to get someone who is truly mythic. But yeah, it's I'm totally with you. I think, the idea that like you have this person who like can't is nonverbal, but like sits in your basement and writes 10x as much code as other people, like that never really made sense to me either. So it's good that people are continuing to evolve that. All right. So, okay, Patrick, I want you to watch this video. I'm gonna read the title while Patrick watches it and gives us his live reaction. It's called "The Beauty and Challenges of AI Generated artistic gymnastics.
Oh dear. Oh, this is Will Smith eats spaghetti.
That's right. It's that, but it's with the latest AI, which makes it even worse.
It's like better than that. It's like version 2 for sure. Like it's much better than that. But it's so much weird. Okay, I just watched a gymnastic shaped thing fall through the floor. Okay.
So
what? I don't. This is nightmare fuel, my friend. Why have you done this to me?
So like at some point, it's like
wait, but it's clearly obvious what it is. Like you can see legs and arms and gymnastics leotards. I don't know what you call them, but none of like if you pause any one of these frames and just showed it to someone, they would not. It would just be bad AI.
Yeah, the difference, I think what makes this so much like next level beyond the Will Smith video is the quality is so good, you know, in the sense of like, you know, when you do see somebody's face, it looks good. It's just the interplay, there's just so much, I don't know how to describe. Everyone needs to take a moment, go to our show notes, click the link, and watch this video. It's only a minute. But it's
how does this only have 31,000 views? Like, did this get ripped off of like TikTok or something? From Instagram. I see. It looks like. Oh no, I can't tell. Oh yeah, maybe.
I found this in a machine learning Reddit or something. I'm not sure exactly where I found it. But yeah, let me see if we could describe this. Okay, so basically, what this is an AI for folks who aren't going to watch a video or listening in their car or something. It's a AI generated video of gymnastics. So imagine, you know, the parallel bars, what is it called when the balance beam.
So more specifically, if you ever watch it like during the Olympics, it's like that exact setup. So the stadium,
right?
There's like judges on the side. So it's like a very conventional gymnastics meet or competition or whatever you call it. Yeah, and then there's like gymnasts on a balance beam. And you'll see a frame where the person is standing like at the start of their routine. Then they begin to do their routine, except instead of bending down and doing a handstand with their legs flipping up in the air, their head folds into their stomach and they go into a gymnastic shaped blob that then falls through the floor and separates into two pieces. But the fans are in the background, like they're still bleachers. The scene has coherence. They look billboarded or something. It's very weird, but the scene has coherence. It's just like, it clearly like, yeah, it doesn't whatever it understands about humans, the gymnastics are breaking those assumptions.
Right. And you know, there's this contrast between the gymnast who is like, you know, just morphing between all these like aberrations. I mean, there's one where it's just like two sets of legs connected to each other that are flipping over each other. But there's this contrast between that and the people. You know, there's gymnasts who are preparing, or there's judges, and those people, because they have pretty low, emotional frequency, you know, they're pretty normal. But there's this person in the middle who's just completely, you know, like going through some crazy emotions.
Yeah, and the equipment, although it bends weird, like tends to also be well rendered. But occasionally you do see people in the background, like oscillate. Like there's a judge in a suit, and then it transitions to a person in a white shirt sitting at a score table. Like the more you watch this, the weirder. I gotta stop watching this, dude. All right, I'm out.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things you could just every time you see something different. But yeah, I think okay. Actually, I remember my point.
Okay. So is it Uncanny Valley related? Because that's what I'm getting the vibes of. But yeah,
it's definitely got Uncanny Valley vibes. My point is, I'm seeing a critical flaw. I saw it in 2012 when we did the AlexNet stuff. And then, you know, I saw it again with self-driving cars, also around 2012. And then I'm seeing it again where people who aren't in the AI field, especially investors, a lot of people with a lot of influence who are generally, you know, really smart people who are counted on their expertise, right? They fail to see that AI is this extremely multidisciplinary field, and being good in one area doesn't mean you're good in all of them. So if you have superhuman image detection, that doesn't mean you've reached superhuman AI. And I think probably what we'll see over time is AI like be less of a focus, and us to like break down AI into more of these subfields, right? Because with self-driving car, you know, the detecting of stop signs and pedestrians and these things became superhuman, right? Early on. Um, and so people thought, oh, well, you know, we're days away, right? But the reality is the policy, like knowing when you can break the rules, knowing like, okay, there's a set of road cones here, but that really means that that whole area is off limits. Like the road cones are kind of telling you this lane is shut down. Like all of the common sense there, we're well behind humans. But because we're superhuman on the image stuff, people kind of translated that. And so, you know, I think we talked about the in painting and how good it is and everything in the beginning, but it's good for people to know that like there's still like entire fields of AI where we're just massively behind. And I think this kind of shows that. I think, you know, merging AI with kind of something that's like physically plausible or just having continuity is something that we don't really know how to do very well yet.
This one, yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of extensions. So gymnastics specifically probably is very difficult because the poses are very uncommon in the training data. Like the people are, to some extent, I mean, superhuman's the wrong word, exceptional human. Like these people are very elite in a very specific set of skills. So they're doing things that are far outside, like standing on your hands as an example. If you looked at imagery across human, you know, civilization, the amount of people standing on their hand at any given time is super low, right?
Yeah.
But during a gymnastics routine, you spend huge amounts of your time like hands down, feet up, right? So there's problems with that. And then like you said too, I think there's all these layers and layers of nuance and semantics that just, I don't know if it's the same, but it feels similar to when, you know, my software is done and it's like, well, maybe like we are very bad sometimes at identifying the quote unquote hard part or the part that'll take the most time. And so you get people really excited and then you kind of see it tip over and fail. But the in-painting example is a good example. Like you in-paint in this way we're saying, and if it fails, it's very low risk. You just do it again or you try in a different way.
Right.
That's very different than I have some security camera and there's a tree in the way. And so I'm going to in-paint the tree and like use that as like anything could show up there. People are going to get confused. Like it's a very, you know, risky endeavor. Like that's not, you would go, oh, that obviously isn't going to work. And it's like, well, maybe. I mean, that case, it seems pretty obvious. But to some people, you may show them that and they may be thinking like, oh, it can see through leaves and it's like of the tree. And it's like, that's not really how it works.
Yeah, I'm going to in-paint my stock portfolio and it sees, oh, there's this Enron-sized hole.
But you probably could find examples where it worked great for whatever reason, just by happenstance or whatever. Like, you in-paint and it predicts the stock trend. And then you think you can just in-paint as a way of doing stock trading. Yeah,
you know, this is a hype cycle I've seen within like my like kind of local community, and I'm seeing it now. And I feel like I don't know if anyone from my workplace listens to the show. I mean, I work at a pretty small company, but there's even people I work with now who they are really good at AI, brilliant, and they think they can predict the stock market, and they do well as long as everyone else is doing well, and then they get completely crushed. I mean, I don't want to wish any future ill gains to anybody that I know, but I've just seen this so many times now that when someone says, yeah, you know, I'm also doing some algorithmic trading, you know, on the side, and oh, it's like starting to make X amount of money, and it's like at some point I won't need to work because I'll just make X, and at some point X will become enough. And then there's always some kind of market downturn, and almost every time these people get hit really, really hard.
Yeah, I pay a fair amount of attention. I mean, we talked about on this thing to finances and the stock market and that kind of stuff. To be convinced out of what you're saying, just go look at the kind of people who work at Renaissance Technologies and the kind of proven returns that they get. and then say, can you outcompete those folks? If you don't know, we don't have time now, but like, yeah, the kinds of people Renaissance Technologies hires for their hedge funds and Jim Simons and the there's just, I don't want to go toe to toe with the kind of folks that work there.
Yeah, I mean, so to play devil's advocate, you could argue that there's also a lot of really uninformed people. But I think it's not the kind of situation where you just have to be better than the average trader. I think you have to be a lot better than that to have a guaranteed, stable, high yield. And so just saying like, oh, I know AI and I can use it and be better than like the 50th percentile trader probably isn't enough to quit your job, for example.
Yeah, I would say it a little different but kind of the same idea is if when you talk to these people, and I'm no expert and I'm not trying to gate you and you do whatever you want. I don't really care. Like,
this is not financial advice. If you lose all your money, it's not our fault.
A lot of the success stories are, survivorship bias. One,
that's true.
Two, they were doing this at a very different time, 40, 50 years ago. I think, like you said, yeah, there's a lot of the meme stocks, but if you see the people who go up against on the other side of GME, the GameStop, and how wrecked they get, even though that they're well financed, like trading against it, maybe not. But then the thing is, I think a lot of the people I hear saying what you do go to, it's like a certain corner of the internet, but experts don't hang out there. And so you get a lot of other people who are talking about algorithmic trading specifically as a really bad one, and Python scripts and things you can share and bots. And people are more than happy to sell shovels to gold miners for technologies and data sources and this kind of stuff. And they're not illegitimate business. I mean, they're just trying to help people. But if you go spend time listening to, industry podcasts or people who are sharing a little bit, and just the amount of consideration. So not just volatility, but the curve of volatility as you go through the expirations and options and how hedging and the various Greeks and the various inefficiencies or efficiencies of options versus futures. And when you start talking to most people who are doing the kind of like, oh, I see, up and to the right returns, they have to make an argument that stuff is irrelevant, that it doesn't matter. All that matters is number go up. And that's a very reductionist view that could be true, but most likely isn't. And so you're playing a gambling game. And if you want to play that, that's fine. But you probably need to go learn about all those other things and at least say they don't apply, or you've considered them and determined them to be irrelevant, rather than, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. All right. We'll go to book of the show. Patrick, you're first. What's your book of the show?
All right. Mine is The Three Body Problem by, okay, we're going to try it. No, I don't know. Okay. Cixin Liu. I can't say it. All right. You can look it up. The Three Body Problem. This was a book I had read a while ago. I thought I must have talked about it, but I looked it up and I don't think I have. And it is written by a Chinese author, which is super interesting in science fiction because I feel like it feels very different to a lot of Western science fiction that's written. But it recently got made into a series by Netflix from the people who did Game of Thrones. But if that makes it better or worse for you is your own sort of opinion. But The Three Body Problem itself is, I think it's a trilogy. I only ever read the first book because I actually didn't love the book. But here, the TV series actually makes it a little bit more palatable, I think, than the book, which was pretty tough to read for me. But definitely an interesting take of, during the Chinese Revolution, someone just basically like down on humanity. It's not good. Like there's lots of problems, and ends up communicating with an alien race that, doesn't share that with other people. And then when people find out, there's this whole like, how does humanity want to relate to the fact that there are aliens coming to Earth? And then it sort of plays out from there. I read the summary, so you may consider that a spoiler, but that was all stuff contained in the back of the book.
That's fine.
So, interesting setup, interesting problem. There are all sorts of other like, semi nearby. People talk about, if you kind of believe that Earth is on a catastrophic course due to global climate change in some way, could you really just release tons of fertilizer into the ocean to sequester carbon dioxide by causing a giant algae bloom? And it really is, when you start to look at it, feasible that a very, very, very small group of people could take something that has absolutely catastrophic results for Earth or for humans, kind of like just on their own. That there doesn't need to be a, group agreement or a large decision-making body. And it's kind of an interesting take. And so definitely recommend it. I just finished the Netflix series. I also thought they did a good job with it. So if you're looking for something to watch, it's definitely a pretty serious show. So just know that going in. But yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I will actually check that out. So it's on Netflix. Is it also called The Three Body Problem?
Yes.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, so my book of the show is also a book that I wasn't crazy about. So I guess Patrick and I have something. So just breaking the fourth wall here, listeners. Patrick and I, we read a lot. I don't know if we read more than one book every 2 weeks. I mean, that's pretty hard for at least for me to do. And so we're going to have to review whatever we're reading. And so it sounds like this week we read some books we're not totally crazy about. I will say so my book is the Checklist Manifesto. I really enjoyed the stories. So this person is a doctor, a medical doctor. And so a lot of their stories were just really interesting medical situations. There is a lot of medical, or maybe what's the right word? They are like cutting people open and doing all sorts of stuff. And there is some detail there. So if you're very squeamish, obviously there's no pictures or anything, but if you're squeamish, think about that before you get the book. But I thought it was fascinating. I mean, there's a whole world around patients and complications that can happen, and miraculous survival stories, resurrection stories, people who are completely incapacitated and doctors were able to revive them. The point of the book is that you should have checklists and force everyone to use them. And it's like a pretty simple point. I mean, it definitely doesn't need a whole book. The book doesn't, it kind of motivates through example, which is a little strange because it's kind of, if you give an example, someone can't really argue that. Like if you're like, okay, I added a checklist and then we saved this person's life. The argument against that is what? Like maybe you would have had some extra time on your hands. You could have eaten an extra meal or something. Like it's like almost indefensible or unassailable. So I wouldn't look at it as a particularly powerful self-help book or anything like that. But these stories, I think, were captivating. I got this one off from the public library using the Libby app, which is, I don't know if it's only an American thing, but depending on where you live, you might have an app that connects to your local public library and lets you. It's effectively like a Kindle or an Audible app that's connected through the library, and all the books you borrow them. And so I found this one on there. I thought it would be pretty interesting. Gave it a read. Overall, kind of lukewarm. Some good stories, but I wouldn't recommend it.
All right. Tool of the show. Well, say something I actually did enjoy, I just finished playing, not to 100%, but I finished the main story for Super Mario Brothers Wonder. I don't know that I've talked too much about Nintendo Switch games, so this is a little bit off topic, definitely not a tool, but I really enjoyed this game. To me, it was just like, for where I am in life, it's the right complexity. It was fun and challenging. I didn't just, rip right through, beat every level. Some levels were a bit of a challenge, but nothing was too challenging. So, anytime I did sort of a session where I sat down and played the game, I was able to make good progress. And it is not super, super long. So I was able to feel the accomplishment of beating it, and the sort of style and approach and whimsy of a sort of 2D platformer, but rendered in a 3D view. And the kind of goofiness, it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's not dark. It's just sort of very lighthearted. It was a very enjoyable game to play. And so if you've not checked it out and you have a Nintendo Switch, I mean, I'm sure you've heard about it, but I definitely give this one a thumbs up. I really enjoyed playing it.
Cool. How does it compare to, there's a Super Mario, I think it's called Super Mario Wii 3D or something, but it's on the Switch. Have you
Super
played
Mario
that one?
3D World or Super Mario?
Oh yeah, something like that.
So that one is 3D, I think, if it's the one I think about. I think there's another Super Mario Brothers, new Super Mario Brothers game as well or something, which I didn't get into. The 3D World I really liked, but it's in 3D, so there's a bit of a, I don't know, there's a different thing to playing 2D. It sort of allows them to be more creative in the limitation. And so I kind of, maybe I'm just old school, I kind of prefer the 2D over 3D. And I don't like when the games get like super hard. There are certain Mario games I think get very punishing in their complexity.
Yeah, the one I was thinking of is actually called Super Mario U Deluxe.
Oh, okay. That's one with like Mario and Luigi. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I have now. It's okay. I think it is pretty difficult. I mean, I was able to get through it, but my kids get pretty frustrated with it. I wonder if Super Mario Wonder is a little easier.
I tried that one. I didn't get into it nearly the same. For whatever reason, the clicking, there's probably different development teams. I know I'm not I'm not into it enough to sort of look, but this one was definitely very well done.
Oh, cool. Maybe I'll check it out. All right, my tool of the show is Amazon Q. I feel like maybe,
I think we had it as a news last time.
That's right. We had it in news, and I've been using it pretty heavily. And so I'm going to upgrade it from a news to a tool. But yeah,
effect.
This this it needs, like, it just ate a mushroom, and now it's super super news. I'm recently building some stuff. I'm not ready to release it yet, but I'm getting there. So I have to keep it a little under wraps for now. But maybe another thing I used Amazon Q for was the LinkedIn bot. I don't know if we talked about the LinkedIn bot on the show.
Yep.
Oh, we did. Okay. So I used it for the LinkedIn bot. I'm using it now on this new thing I'm building, and it's amazing. Like, some things it does really well are, if I'm refactoring something. So if I'm taking some code out of a function, taking some code out and making it its own function, then I'll cut that code, create a function, paste it there, and then I'll go back to the place where I cut the code out, and Amazon Q knows, like, call the function. So it just like auto completed that for me. And so there's just like, there's so many things where, and when it hallucinates, the way it works is it's just like autocomplete, where you get this shadow of what it wants to write. And if you press tab, that shadow becomes a reality. And if you do anything else, it just disappears. So you kind of get used to this like phantom code in front of your cursor. And over time, you get used to sort of being blind to it when it's doing something that you don't really expect. But then you get this like wonderful surprise when it actually does auto-generate exactly what you wanted. And it'll even, sometimes it'll auto-generate whole paragraphs of like maybe 5-6 lines of code. So yeah, I think it's amazing. Folks should check it out. Obviously, as we talked about in the past, don't do this for work. If you're doing this on a work computer, you should instead go to your boss and ask him to get some kind of license or figure something else out. I'm sure there's companies that have enterprise solutions there, but if you're in college, high school, building something on your own, it definitely behooves you to get an AWS Builder account and get Amazon Q. The reason I ended up on Amazon Q and not GitHub Copilot or one of these other ones is frankly just better marketing. I have the AWS extension. A lot of people have that in their VS Code, and they just parlayed that into a, like a little notification. Like, I think originally it was part of the AWS extension. So everyone just got it for free. And then it became its own extension once they had kind of a critical mass. So they did a great job marketing it. I think that all of them would probably be equally good, though.
Yeah, I'm excited that when these become commonplace and able to be used at work, and there's like a well-established practice around them. But yeah, for now, I've not delved into these, but I definitely kind of want to.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious for, your coding for, C++ and these things if it would be as useful. My guess is it'd probably struggle.
Oh no, don't tell me that. I want to envision it being panacea.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, so a couple of things that are just first principles, right? Like it's not going to know like, oh, this memory address is actually like a FIFO in hardware or something, right? So
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, fair enough. But I mean, that would be the day when you can feed I don't have to do that quite as much anymore, thankfully. But if you feed it a data sheet and it would build out for you communications protocol, like that would be amazing.
Oh man, that'd be awesome.
That'd be cool. All right. Now I'm just fantasizing. All right. Somebody out there, make it happen.
All right. On to the topic of resume writing. This came from a gentleman. I never give last names because I don't know who wants that or not. But Matthew C. We had a discussion on LinkedIn. Matthew sent me a LinkedIn message. He said that you really enjoyed the show. He was wondering if I could take a look at his resume. Fortunately, my LinkedIn AI didn't flag it as spam, which it has flagged actually. It has a couple of false positives. So if you're listening, I do apologize for that. But this one, let through. and so, yeah, I talked to Matthew. I gave him some tips on his resume, and I said, hey, what if we did a show on this and gave you credit? And he was thankfully, really supportive of us doing that. So thank you, Matthew, for inspiring the show.
To start at the maybe obvious, why even have a resume? I mean, back in the good old days, no, they were that good. It is actually a little. You'd show up and. You may have gotten a job interview in some various ways, and then they would ask you for a printed out, and you would have like a little leather, or at least that's what we always had, like these little leather binders, and you would unzip them and pull out, on a printed, very nice paper that you would buy specifically for printing resumes, and you would, hand them over. I haven't done that in a very, 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 very long time now. Most of the time, everybody gets copies electronically because in order to apply for a job, you have to go to some portal on some website, and the almost very first thing you need to do is upload your resume and then proceed to type in most of the information from your resume into various forms. But, it's an expectation that you have a resume when you apply for jobs today. And the reason they have you, upload it is to share it with everyone, to have it recorded for other potential openings. It is a thing. But it's also because they do run keyword detection. They try to categorize it. And when you kind of read on the internet, you see people bemoaning this. And I do agree it's kind of problematic, but it's also very difficult, especially if you work at a large company and get many thousands of resumes, trying to categorize so that the right people look at the right resumes. Because as a person who does hire sometimes, you'll get a dump of resumes. And if they're mismatched, it becomes very difficult to trudge through them and say like, hey, these are totally the wrong kinds of people. Like, it's not that they're good or bad. It's just this is not a match for the kind of role that I'm looking for. And so I need to find a way to get access to the ones that I need. And so I think having a resume, probably pretty obvious, but I'll give one non-obvious thing, which is and maybe you're already there. I don't want to make an assumption, but one of the things is as you move through your career, it becomes a little harder to remember some of the exact details that you want to provide for previous positions and roles. And so it's really a log. You may trim stuff off as they become older and older, but having those things written down so that next time you go to apply for a job, you're sort of appending and then trimming down is actually really, really useful to have that sort of log that you can go through and be able to curate for future applications.
Yep. Yeah, totally. So What is a resume? There's actually not that much variance. Most people follow, pretty standard formats. Sometimes I've interviewed designers and more creative folks who have also done interesting things to their resume. But in a lot of those cases, those folks also have a portfolio, so you really can't go wrong on your resume. But for them, but for professionals, I think try to keep it to one page. Um, I think that's important. I think that way everything is just fitting on one screen. Um, and it usually starts out with your name and some generic information. Some people have put uh, whether they need a visa or not. That can be a important point that sometimes I've seen in the very top line of the resume. But usually just some basic information. Where does this person live? Their name, etc., phone number potentially. And then it goes straight into various education and work experiences and accomplishments there. And then usually at the end, it will end with a list of let's say skills or trades that this person has. So this person might be an expert on compiler optimization, and so they'll put compiler optimization. And sometimes people will put more soft skills and things like led their volleyball team in college or something like that. This is a little different than a CV. So a CV, which I think is Latin, right? Curriculum vitae, something like that.
I think that's right.
So a CV will typically list out all of your research papers, or depending on how many you have, it might be a subset of them. And so that's where it can take several pages to list out. But even if you're writing a CV, I would effectively have a resume on the first page, and then have a section of notable papers and awards, and then you can have a list, and that list might be 4, 5, 6 pages, but it's basically a glossary of your favorite research journal papers and awards. So you're still basically writing a resume and adding some content to it.
Yeah, I would agree. If for some reason you need to go past one page, and some people say it's okay to be on two, sometimes people have a very strong preference for one. And if you're going to two, unless there's a really, really good reason, it tends to just draw on too long. So if you have stuff that requires more, I would say prepare two different, I think that's what Jason's alluding to as well, is like have two different documents. One is your resume, concise, one page. And then you can even say on there, more details or CV available if needed, or description, something, and then have another document which is longer and goes into more details if there's really things that you need to list out. So here's another one though, Jason, I don't know how you feel about it. Some people say having a GitHub on the resume, a GitHub link, is a requirement.
Oh, that's a good question. I think I think you should only put things on your resume if they're good. This
is a great answer. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is your resume is not your autobiography, right? Your maybe your autobiography is also rose tinted, but if I was to write an autobiography, I would definitely call out all the extremely dumb things I've done in my life, along with all the things I'm proud of. So this is not that. This is supposed to be the absolute best side of you, no flaws, nothing. And so your GitHub could be the best part of your resume, and I think if it is, you could have an entire section dedicated to that. I've seen that work to really good effect, where they'll say, "Here's a personal projects section," and the header will have their GitHub, and then they'll have a bunch of projects. And if they're popular, they'll have stars. If they're not popular, a good thing to do is to say kind of what technical problem this solves, and maybe what projects it's similar to. So if you built, for example, an automatic differentiation engine and a DSL language for that, then you could say similar to PyTorch, And so, you built your own. Obviously, it's hard to eat into the market share of PyTorch or TensorFlow, but you built something on that, in that milieu. So yeah, I think generally it's really, really important to have that kind of portfolio, just like any artist or creative person would. But don't just put your GitHub and you have like 0 repositories or something. That's not helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen, and I know people who say you have to have your GitHub, but there's a lot of personal preference here. But if you put your GitHub, I think you're saying there's important to have spent space on your resume to put. So I'll go visit it. And if I go visit it and it's like, oh, you just have various forks of projects that, require you to fork it for some reason, or like configuration files, or just things that are obviously, class projects where you started with the template. Yeah, it just doesn't feel like, what this isn't helping me. It's not really hurting me, but like I would just leave it off and save the person the time if there's not something there that you're really trying to show off. But I think it can depend. I think some people don't hesitate. If you have stuff, even if it's not having a lot of stars or isn't really popular, if it's code that you wrote, that you worked on, you should be proud of it and you should put it. But if it's code that you just copied or forked, or was a group project, I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the thing too is if you don't put it, then people won't think about it. It's a Streisand effect, right? So if you put the GitHub repo and as you said, it's all like University of Chicago, course 12, 0 stars and there's no tests or anything, then now people like, it's actually kind of worse than just not putting anything.
All right. Well, I think maybe we'll go through some do's and don'ts. And so I'll start off with a couple of do's. Definitely be specific. So when you're writing that, hey, I was at this company, I mean, that's, very specific. Put the dates that you were there, the location, those things are good. You can put the skills used. I think that's important too. But also like when you write projects, say specifically things that will make sense to people who may not be super familiar with the jargon of what you were doing. So if you were, doing something in a database, but your database had a particular internal name, probably not super useful if you're applying externally to put the internal names of those databases. So put down, database, schema design, right? But definitely be specific about not the work that was being done on the project, but the work that you were doing on the project.
Right.
And so I see a lot of people that you spend time asking because they're pretty junior and they put a pretty high level project and it's, what did you do? What were you responsible for? And I think, and it's not, again, you don't have to be nervous or ashamed or bashful about it, but just put down the specific thing that you were doing. I was writing unit tests. I was doing integration, whatever it is, that's fine. Put that there. Don't put, I was responsible for a project that, did $100 million and, was 10,000 lines of code that, had a SLA of, 99.999% uptime. It's like, okay, this sounds like a group of people were doing this. Yeah. What were you doing?
Yeah, it's a good call out too, because it'll give the person looking at the resume some idea of your kind of compass, right? So for example, if someone says, I implemented the Python standards committee at my company and I made like 20 or 30 decisions around like different syntax and all these things, then it's going to excuse me, it's going to paint a picture to interviewers that you're somebody who is really cares about dev infra and the developer ecosystem and all of that. Conversely, if you say, hey, I wrote this code that added this much incremental revenue to the bottom line of the company, and I worked on these features that caused this many more customers to come in the door, then people know, okay, this is somebody who's very product focused, and they're going to be kind of a good person to like be in between the business and the engineering, right? So isolating your specific contributions helps the interviewer know like what your strength is.
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess, I don't know, kind of corollary, the sort of thought there. I'll be a little harsh. If you try to scam your way into getting the interview, people are going to figure it out, especially in the kinds of jobs that we're talking about here. Almost always there's going to be a technical portion of the interview and it's going to become obvious. So even if you happen to put something down to score an interview, either when they go to check your references or they're talking to you, or like it'll come out. And so you'll just have wasted time, and then people are going to be irritated and upset, or you're interviewing for a role that's a higher level than you'll be able to successfully interview for. And sure, you may tell yourself, well, there's like a very outside chance that like I'll score it. I don't know. The opposite is worse, right? Like the opposite, that you get sort of kicked out of the queue because people are like, no, this person is just like, there's just no good, rather than, oh, they were miscategorized.
Right. And even like at a more granular level, you might just not get the right job for you. Like maybe you really should be spending half your time with these Python committees, setting the course of the company, like, and the language specs and all of that. But, you like really tried to fluff up like your like impact numbers. And because of that, now you're on some product team. You could have been on some other team that was a better fit, et cetera. So it's like, represent yourself. I guess I want to make sure that we're not creating contradiction here. Like, obviously, the time you accidentally deleted the production database, don't put that on your resume. But, of all the good aspects of you, be faithful to that sort of distribution of talent and represent that as faithfully as possible on the resume.
Another thing is, any item that you put on your resume, be ready to talk about. And so if you put down, hey, I've seen I'll give a goofy one first. Someone put down, I can solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute. And then so the interviewer thought it'd be funny. They brought a Rubik's Cube and asked the person to solve it. And so, I mean, that's a bit of a goofy example. And they just put it in there to be funny, but they got called out on it. But I've seen people put down, I'm an expert, or I know, and then they put down 6 programming languages. And then someone starts talking to them about one of them, like, well, I used it for a tiny project one time once. And it's like, well, maybe you needed some way to qualify that or call it out. But similarly, it's very frustrating when someone puts down that they worked on a project that's relevant to the role that they're interviewing for at a company, and you ask them to talk about that project. And I've had people just tell me, I don't remember, or I don't know. And it's like, well, why did you put it on your resume? Like, you have other stuff here. Like, what is it that you do remember, right? Like, be ready. If you put it on there, people are going to ask you about it.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good point. Don't put that 20 languages unless you've been listening to the show for at least a few months.
There we go. How many languages do you put down? If you were going to put them down, Jason, I'm curious, like what threshold would you have to cross? Like, how many do you think you'd put?
That's a great question. So, okay, I have maybe a slightly different view than Patrick, although it's very similar.
All right.
So I think that you can put down any language as long as you're prepared to like really understand it between now and when you're interviewed. So for example, let's say you're interviewing for a game development job, right? So, and let's say you have like you've done a few small projects in C#, right? So you can put C#, but if your resume gets through the screener and you land the interview, you're going to need to take a week off whatever you're doing and cram C# really, really hard, because like you don't want to show up. I think it's okay to like flex a little bit on the interview as long as you're prepared to back it up by either knowing that language really well or getting like really up to speed with it very quickly.
Okay, so I will accept this, that you say that if you're willing to at least do one of the technical interview programming problems in any language you put down.
Right. Yeah, okay. We're on the same
before the interview. Okay, I will buy this premise. All right, so how many?
Oh, how many for me personally?
Yeah, how many would you put? Again, not saying like you might be +1 because you are trying to target a specific job and it's close enough to something you've done. I'll buy that. But like, how many would you feel comfortable putting?
Yeah. So here's what I think for me personally, obviously different for different people, but I think that if I cover like the 3 or 4 most popular ones for my profession, so in my case that would be Python,
Yep.
C++, JavaScript / TypeScript, and what would the fourth one be for AI? I would actually, I would probably put something to the effect of like Bash, Unix kind of scripting. I mean, I haven't thought about this in a while, but something like that.
All right.
And so I would put those, and then I would just assume that companies know, like, okay, all of our AI is in Swift, but we know that like there's a lot of people who are really smart who haven't used Swift yet, and so they're going to have to interview Python people. That's the way I would approach it.
Yep. If they wanted it for AI, they would just let you learn Swift on the job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Now, if you're, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, if I'm like, let's say I'm junior engineer, straight out of college, I would probably try to figure out what language the company is that I'm applying to, like what language they need. And I would put that language and I would study it hard if I got the interview. That's what 19-year-old, 22-year-old, whatever Jason would do. So.
All right, fair enough. So I would put 2. And I hear your points. I'm not saying no on them, but my reason for bringing this up. So you said 3, 4. Okay, I'll give it the Bash thing. Okay, maybe everyone could add that. I don't know. I don't actually consider my Bash scripting to be that great. So maybe I would have 2 tiers, and in total have maybe 4, maybe 3. But we routinely see people out of college 6, 7, 8 programming languages written down, and I'm just like, no, there's no way. It's like, what is the bar here? If I asked you even just basic questions in a random one of these, what is the chance you're actually going to be able to answer these?
Yeah, it's tough because like, for example, if you're applying to do I work at a self-driving car company. If you're applying to do work on the car, you're going to need to know C++. And so literally people who don't have C++ on their resume, the resume just doesn't make it through. And so if C++ is like, you've done a few examples, I think the part where we agree is you need to be able to show up and do a 60-minute interview in every single language you put on there. Now, I think that it's probably not too hard to get to the point where you could do a technical interview in 6 languages. It doesn't mean you've had years of experience in any of them. But
yeah, I guess, this is a interesting topic. Okay, there's some variance here. In your example, I've hired people who I needed to know C++. I'm going to ask them, oh, okay, use this hash map, standard unordered map. What's the default insertion policy for standard unordered map? Hey, what is that like? What is this thing going to look like? What is, if you have this kind of error that, equates to a symptom of a Stack Overflow, what is your suspected reason why? Or I'm going to write code up on the board that introduces an, array index out of bounds and asks you, hey, what's going to happen here? And the answer is undefined. And then we should talk to what are potential things that could happen. So,
see, that's totally different. See, what I had in my
simply solve. No, that's an extension. That's if I needed a specific language and I wanted to check that you actually know that language. But so this one's interesting. Okay, so this one's people should be thoughtful about.
Yeah, in my mind, I had this mental model where, like, you're using one of these tools to interview, right? Like
LeetCode. What are they called? You're saying I could write LeetCode problems in one of these 6 languages.
Yeah, right. But you're that's totally right. So that's an interesting thing, right? Let's dive into this. So if someone puts, let's say, Python as one of their languages, but they're a junior engineer, they graduated last year from college, right? Or they got a bunch of Coursera certificates last year. Or let's stick with C++. Let's say they only have one language and it's C++. they'll probably still not be able to answer those questions, right? So I think it matters whether someone says they can do a language. There's basically like three levels. There's I bet I can learn this in a week to where I could be as productive as anybody else, like any other person who is not an expert. Then there's like I could fix like weird problems, and then there's like I'm a guru. It's kind of like there's three levels, probably more than that.
Don't put guru on any of them, just as a side.
Don't ever put guru. But you're right. I think if someone it sort of transcends the number of languages, right? If someone just puts C++, they're really not telling you whether they can pass the kind of questions that you just asked. And I wonder if there's maybe a way that in their resume they can.
Yeah. All right. So I'll amend what I'm saying based on what you did. I think when you list them out, maybe having tiers like, I don't know, not as experts, like proficient in, and then maybe a couple languages, proficient. I'm trying to think of like wordsmith it, but like proficient and like, familiar with, and then maybe a few other languages.
Oh yeah. Right.
Something like that. But I'll admit, I think you're right. I wouldn't be harsh. So I'm not going to bring someone in and ask these kinds of questions unless, and we didn't talk about this, when you're listing out your experiences, you should definitely write what languages each one of them was primarily in, or which language or languages each of them was in. So I'm going to look, if I need someone with actual years, not out of college, but someone who says they are a C++ programmer, because I go look in their resume and it says they spent 4 years in this project doing C++, then I'm going to expect them to have some day-to-day. I mean, I was trying to give extreme examples to evoke a response, but like I'm going to expect them to have some familiarity if they've listed that.
That totally makes sense. I think that's actually the way to do it, because all these things like expert, guru, proficient, they're all very qualitative, right? But if you were to say C++ for 10 years straight, well, then yeah, I think it's fair to ask that person like which of the different standard maps is better in which cases and whatever. Like that must have come up in the past 10 years. So yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it.
We've made progress. The world is a better place.
That's right. So don'ts on your resume. The biggest one is don't have mistakes. I had not a mistake, but something that was confusing on my resume where, and I think you probably had this too, Patrick, where, I was a student and I was working at the same time. Now for master's degrees is very common, but it's not very common for PhD students to also work. And so this really threw people for a loop. And, and what ended up like really helping here was that I put very specific dates. So originally I put, I started my PhD in 2004 and I finished it in 2010 or whatever it was. But instead I put really specific, like, okay, this is the day I started. This is the day I got a master's degree. This is the day that I worked. And then this is the day I finished my dissertation. And so like, I think just being really specific, like ambiguity is a form of a mistake when it comes to your resume, and being really specific helps a lot. And definitely don't have mistakes. If you put, just from personal experience, if I see someone and they like, the dates don't really make sense, like they kind of work two jobs at the same time and they didn't work, and the dates aren't really lining up, especially if they don't match their years of experience, like 10 years of experience, but you only worked for 3 years, then I'll just say, this isn't like, this is actually a kind of a segue I'll go into briefly. Managers have to look at a ton of resumes, right? And typically we'll only need to hire 1, 2, maybe 3 people at the most at any given time. And so the goal isn't necessarily to like spend an unbelievable amount of time to get the absolute best person and squeeze out every single % of the interview experience to be absolutely flawless, right? And knowing this actually helped me a lot, even as an interviewee. Like I'll get rejected. I don't apply that much to jobs anymore, to be honest. But there was a time where I was really, when I was changing jobs, like a few years ago, I was applying to a lot of jobs. And in the past, like sometimes I'll get rejected for really weird reasons, or things seem like they'll be going fine and then radio silence. And what I've realized is that the system is trying to trade off, the manager's time with, having the perfect possible interview experience. And so, and so, if you have a bunch of mistakes on your resume, the manager will say, like, this is going to eat up a lot of my time. I can just skip this resume and get somebody who's probably as good and save myself from having to ask all these clarifying questions, right? So mistakes are really not good. Try to avoid them. Look at the resume. Make sure that you don't have a cover letter that's for the wrong company. I've seen things like that. And just be really diligent. It's important.
I think the other thing that is a mistake is I have seen grammar mistakes are not, I'm okay with that because not everyone has English as their first language, but sometimes like spelling mistakes to where you said, like it creates ambiguity. It's like, I don't actually know what they're saying here. And especially if you're looking for someone on it, like they did this one thing and this one thing tells me maybe they have prior experience here and it's written in a way where I can't parse what it's supposed to be saying. Like Jason said, the company I do right now, like there isn't even really a good mechanism for me because I can't reach out to that person directly. So I have to go back to HR, ask HR to reach back out and like, hey, can you like, it's just not a thing that likely happens unless I really, really thought there was good potential in a resume. And so you can get kind of bumped out for relatively small. So have people who aren't like just family, have your family read it and just say like, is this reasonably clear to you, even though you may not understand some of the terms? Do you see any spelling mistakes? That kind of thing.
Yep. Another very simple one, don't put images. So my company, yours probably too, Patrick, pulls the text out of the resume. And so images really mess that up. I've seen this where it's just the information is just totally corrupt, and then you have to click on the resume and all of that. And so there's probably folks who didn't even make it through the screen because of all sorts of weird artifacts that came out of the images in their resume. So just avoid that. There's not really a reason to do that.
Related is, we're going to do this in a second, but I'll just combine them here, is not just images, but people will use like colored sections like, gray and then a darker gray for like each experience of work to give visual separation. Looks great. I don't know, whatever. Some of I think they get printed on a fax machine and then scanned in, but sometimes we end up with them. They're super hard to read. The contrast is destroyed. The text extraction could fail under such circumstances. If you go to a job fair and you're handing a physical resume, sometimes like that's the one that goes in the system, even if you upload one later. So just be aware, like, in my opinion, two things. One, don't use a fancy template, like with lots of image bullets and just like very as simple as it can be. It needs to look nice, but it doesn't need to be complex to be looking nice. And try not to, certainly not using any colors besides black and white would be my opinion. Try to keep it black and white. Try to make sure it's like the most parsable, like the easiest to scan in. If someone gets a black and white copy or a, decimated version of what you uploaded. And so really, really do keep it simple. And this is specific to our slice of engineering. If you're an artist or applying for, a summer job, I don't know. Those probably have their own sort of ways people like, maybe a spritz of cologne or something on the resume helps. I don't know, but none of that's going to help here. And like, it's just going to create more problems.
Yeah, totally. I mean, my college experience, I built a lot of different things. And I really wanted to show that off, but you should send people to landing pages for those things. So my resume was all black and white, but it had hyperlinks to the pages, which were then had some nice like design on them. But yeah, I think the resume is just not the place for that. I just think that you have to appeal to both the people who are looking at it and this sort of lossy, partially autonomous system that's going to do all the pre-screening. And so you have to be careful there. Another thing I wouldn't do are, put these like qualities of your character, this is actually, I mean, it would be really nice to show your character on your resume. But the problem is, it's just, when people are reading resumes and they come across like hardworking or friendly or something, at best, they just ignore it. Like they have blindness to it. I mean, this is their 30th resume they've looked at today, and it's just, they skip over it. At worst, it does seem like a little bit weird, right? Because, it's just weird for someone to call themselves friendly or motivated or hardworking. I think, again, similar to what we said with languages, if you're hardworking, then find objective things that you did. So, for example, let's say you built 100 houses a year for Habitat for Humanity, like physically built the houses. Well, then that shows you're super hardworking, right? So just put that. So, find how have these social qualities resulted in some objective thing that you've done in the world, and just put that thing.
Yep, I agree. And I mean, this extends to the interview. We're not talking about interview prep right now, but everybody's on their best behavior on resumes and on the thing for the most part. So if anything, so two things. One, everybody's saying they're hardworking and motivated and willing to work long hours or whatever they think. Like, I'm not saying anyone should or does do that, but like whatever they think will, get them the job, everyone is pretty much trying to do. And on the other side, the people doing the interview assume those things. So they assume that people are on their best behavior and are that way. And so, like Jason said, it's really better to show than to tell. And if you need to put it don't make it too flowery. Like it just, because then people think you're kind of like overcompensating for something. Like, why are they saying they're so hardworking? It's very weird.
Yep, totally agree. I think we didn't really have this in the do section, kind of, but we'll cover it now. Is I do think it's important to call out your what do you call it? What would you call this section? Basically, like I think it's like hobbies and activities.
Yeah, sure. Like extracurriculars. Yeah,
extracurricular. Yeah, exactly. So one thing I put on my early resumes was that I ran like a volleyball team. I played in like 3 different volleyball leagues. And so I gave people the impression like, okay, here's somebody who like can be on a team, can lead a team, can like play a sport pretty regularly for a long period of time. And I think that way I didn't have to put things like motivated or something, or friendly or something. So yeah, definitely I think extracurriculars are good. I wouldn't put things that are controversial because again, it's like if something is really polemic, right? And half the people will love you, half the people will not like you. I don't think the people who love you are going to pass you in the interview if you're not competent. But I do think the people who don't like you will make your interview really difficult. And so it's kind of a lose-lose situation. So I would avoid putting things that are just like polemic like that. But for things like sports, charitable things, I mean, these things are great for your resume.
So I think a little bit about briefly resources, how to produce your resume. So because of all the other things we've already been saying, I think it's pretty much any reasonable text editor would be fine. But even just using Google Docs to produce it, it really shouldn't have requirements that it be fancy and needs to be done in, Adobe Illustrator or something. I mean, if you want to do that, it's probably because you're looking for a job related to that. But for our field, at least, I think it should be able to, Google Docs is free. On the Mac, I usually use Pages or Microsoft Word, just something that in general is, text focused and does allow you a little bit of formatting. I mean, do format it to look nice, but don't go overboard.
Yep. And just a general rule, if you're doing something, you really want to think about the audience, right? And so I'm going to link a podcast that I listened to that's geared towards managers. It's literally called Manager Tools, the podcast. And they have an episode, it's actually a 5-part series on how to scan resumes. And so like putting yourselves in the shoes of someone who's looking at your resume, I think can really help you in writing your resume. So if they say something like, if there's too many colors, just throw it in the garbage. And you're looking at your resume that you created in Adobe Illustrator. It'll kind of put things in perspective. So yeah, I think this is a great chance to see kind of what other people see when they look at your resume by listening to that episode.
That's great. And then I think you put this on here, but I mean, for the programmers out there using LaTeX to do their markdown version of the resume, I guess is an option. It's going to get made into a PDF anyway, so I guess that's an option. Is that how you do it?
Yeah, the reason I used LaTeX is for a CV. It helps with like the references. That now I remember. But I wouldn't recommend that. Even if you're a PhD student, there's probably better ways to do it nowadays. I think the important thing is what Patrick said. Use the tool you're comfortable with, and the tool that is pretty popular, and don't try and do it in an image processing tool and create something that's really ad hoc layout wise.
All right. Well, to wrap, like last statement here, I think we're running a bit long, but hopefully this is useful. I think for a lot of these things, one of, like Jason was mentioning, is if you want to say you're hardworking, show you're hardworking, put down things that indicate that you're hardworking. And I think it isn't the only goal, but when you're picking projects to work on at your job, or careers or hobbies to do, thinking about how they may show on a resume is worth considering, right? I think not because the resume matters a ton, but because you're thinking about that as part of career development. And part of having a career is, having hobbies outside of that, but having the ability to show your, potential as an employee. And so I think putting thought into, how am I going to choose what to work on, and what is it going to look like, later? So as an example, if I was reading something this morning, COBOL, there's a, dearth of COBOL engineers. So at work, someone might say, hey, we have this COBOL code we really want you to take on. You should think, is that something that I really want for my future? Is it something that, and a way of thinking about that, is that something I really want to put on my resume? Like, am I going to want another job in COBOL? I mean, to be fair, it could be really lucrative. It's an interesting bet if there really is going to be a, scarcity of COBOL engineers. But if it's not something that's going to make sense there, then you might want to find and see if there's an alternative or something else within reason. Not, again, as maybe the only thing you think about, but trying to consider how that might look. People do this all the time for university applications. They think in high school, what should I be doing to get into a good university? You're going to work a job probably a lot longer, or can work a lot longer. People can work 4, 5, 6, 7 years. So even putting a little bit of thought towards, over that time, how do I compound things that will help me be marketable is very important. And I think as a manager, it's something that I try to think about for my employees is, I'm not trying to retain them by making them unmarketable. I'm trying to make them feel like they can stay here by continuing to let them do things in a way that would be very marketable, because then they're going to feel no need that they're trapped, right? They're doing things that they know they could parlay into other careers or other jobs, other places, which makes them content and happy and growing.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I mean that's a great call out. I think just the last sort of call to action is you're if you're in college, you might think that your the work to kind of like build yourself up is kind of over. Like, I get my job and I never have to look at this resume again. I can just throw it in the garbage. But no, like you're I think it's always good to kind of keep that in mind. I mean, definitely there's several different reasons to take on a project or a job, but that's definitely one that you should keep up there. Cool. All right. This was awesome. We covered a lot of good material. If folks out there have other resources, other tips, feel free to throw it on the Discord or on the Patreon group. Thanks everyone who have given us their patronage on Patreon. We really appreciate it. I did ask in the members only section, what kind of perks do folks want? Do folks want to have like a Zoom call with us? Do they want us to look at their resumes? Like what sort of like Patreon benefits are folks interested in? And I think there's as Patrick used the word earlier, sort of a survivorship bias here, where the folks who are in our Patreon really just want to thank us for the content that we give everyone for free. We do really appreciate that. But I'll ask to the general audience as well, if there is something interesting that you think we can do as part of the Patreon experience. Always just throw us an email, throwdown@gmail.com, or throw it on the Discord or in Patreon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.